Okay. So I wanted to welcome everybody. While we are going through this portion of the session, if you could do me a favor and make sure that your chat function is operational and that you keep yourself muted. In the chat box, I would like, if you wish to, give your name, your preferred pronouns, your agency, and your role, and maybe a quick understanding of why you're interested in this project. And again, let's do that in the chat. I have designated half of this time for questions and answers after this presentation. First and foremost, I wanted to make sure that everything that happens with the city of Seattle, like any other government, is required to produce public documents to people upon request, and that includes any documents here, the transcripts from here, the video from here today, but also any work that you do with the city of Seattle is open for request by the public at any time. So getting into some of the mechanics of this, the Regional Catastrophic Planning Grant Project for Resilience Hubs funding is an open and competitive process. If you are interested in looking at the boilerplate information, you can look at the contract for all consultants. Again, because this will be posted openly in public, you'll be able to get these links that I have listed here off of here so that you can look all of these things up. They are also in the RFP. This project, when we have selected a consultant for it, will begin on 9/15/2023, and this project will run until 9/30/2025. And then if you have not already registered with the City of Seattle to be a consultant with us, there's the link there. You must register in order to apply. The budget for this RFP is $700,000, with the consulting being $200,000, and community contracts are $500,000. And we will talk about those community contracts in just a moment. Let's talk about our priority populations that this grant is looking to serve. Because this grant is a FEMA grant, most of you know that federal grants can be restrictive and a little bit prohibitive. So the priority population that FEMA has set is for a high or very high social vulnerability index. And within the RFP, I included a link for you for part of the social vulnerability index scoring that we look at. So people that we are going to be looking to serve: underserved, under-resourced, underrepresented, people who live in a depressed socioeconomic status, people who have limited English proficiency, people who are elderly, people who are pregnant, young children, as well as people of color who are often most impacted. And then people who have intellectual, developmental, and physical disabilities. The background on this project, RCPG puts out a NOFO every couple of years, and each of the projects that is chosen interlinks with each other so that we all plan together, we all work together in our region, which is great because we, in theory, are covering all the bases. So the Puget Sound region is vulnerable to catastrophic earthquakes from two different sources: the Seattle Fault, which runs right under downtown Seattle and under I-90. So if you look at I-90 all the way to the mountains, there's a fault line directly under there. And then there's the Cascadia Subduction Zone Fault. That one can be a 9 or higher magnitude earthquake that can be absolutely catastrophic to the region. So this project is going to build on previous RCPG projects, working to focus on how communities activate responsive and resilient community efforts to one of those catastrophic earthquakes and its impacts. Plus, we want to develop the use of regional resilience hubs to be places where members can go for relief from a variety of hazards. Now, what I mean by that, although the grant itself is designed to address catastrophic earthquakes, we must address all of the hazards that people in the Puget Sound region are experiencing to make this an effective project. Which means the regular recurring risks like extreme weather. With that, we need to use those more common hazards to create safe and familiar systems in community spaces where people will use them again all year long and likely to return after a catastrophic earthquake because they know that they can receive some sort of help there. We want to increase our understanding of and provide better focus on communities' existing resilience planning. We want to look at their existing resilience resources to help underscore the gaps in catastrophic planning, but also help fill those gaps. The goal of this project ultimately is to plan resilience hubs and other resource strategies with the community rather than for them, which has been traditionally what has happened, and we have seen it fail over and over again. So looking at the timeline for this project, Q1 is for the first quarter of 2023, and so we have moved on a little bit from there. And so now I'm seeking out a consultant who will plan with me for this project through 2025. We can look at several different neighborhoods in which we can connect with and start planning with. We can have maybe, 4, maybe we could have 20. It depends on how many people are interested and have the capacity, especially after COVID, to provide the energy and the resources for this work. And so we will be selecting a consultant that will begin again in September 15th, 2023. And through that period, we are going to be doing outreach to different focus groups and different workshops in different neighborhoods and communities, whatever community is for a certain type of people, whoever they may be in a neighborhood. It could be the entire neighborhood. It could be a select group. We are going to be doing regional seminars to plot out neighborhoods that can also benefit from this, as this is a regional effort. We will have additional neighborhoods as we keep going and we learn more. And we will have CBOs selected, which is the community-based organizations. So what's going to happen with that money that goes to the community is we will be contracting with them directly to help us do these focus groups, help us do these workshops within the community so that they are cultural based, they are language based, and they have people that they trust speaking to them and asking them personal questions about their experiences. And so we will repeat this process after we do an initial process, and then we are going to do a big virtual seminar, and we'll have people from all over the country joining in on those. And then at the end, we're going to write a final project report that will go to FEMA that will explain like what we know, what we learned, who we contacted, different methodologies, and that sort of thing. And that's in Q3 going to be the final report submitted to FEMA. So for a submission, it is laid out in the RFP that there are mandatory things. All things are mandatory with the exception of the letter of interest. I am very curious to hear more about why people want to participate in this project since it is such a big project. But we need the consultant questionnaire, that optional letter of interest. If you choose to do so, we need to make sure that you have proof of your legal business name, your minimum qualifications, your consultant inclusion plan, and your proposal response. And you can go ahead and either submit that through mail or email. The address for our office is here. It's 105 Fifth Avenue South, number 300. And if you would like to submit it electronically, you can submit it to rcpg.hubs@seattle.gov. We want to make sure that those electronic submissions are titled rcpg.rfp.submission. We want to make sure that we don't lose that in the emails as people are submitting questions and such. We want to make sure that it's that your proposal is 20 pages maximum. You can be double-sided, letter size, which is 8.5 by 11 standard, 1-inch margins, single spacing, and a minimum of 11-point font. The selection process, we will do our initial screening once July 21st has passed, which is the deadline for all submissions. We will go ahead and select a team to go ahead and review those for the initial screening. We'll look at the proposals and evaluate them. We will then contact people who have passed that initial evaluation 4 interviews. And then if you have gone through the process with the interviews and continue on to references, we will be checking references, and then we will make a selection and the award will be announced. Our selection process evaluation criteria is as follows. The design description, 30 points. Capacity and experience is going to be 20 points. Partnership and collaboration, 20 points. Cultural competency is 30 points. And your budget will be 5 points. Interviews will constitute 20 of those points for a maximum of 125 points in this process. So that is a brief overview of this project itself, and I know you must have more questions, and so I'm going to open up the floor for any questions and answers that you would like to start asking about the process, the program itself. Go right ahead, and I see Brandy.
Yes, thank you so much. I was curious, in the RFP, it mentions that this is building on previous RCPGP work. Does
Yes.
that work did it have any publicly available deliverables or any outcomes that can be reviewed?
Yes, and so you can look these projects up for the Puget Sound. So we currently have 4 different RCPG projects in process. Again, because it's staggered, we all started like a year after the other. So mine is Resilience Hubs. The one prior to me is at Pierce County, and they are doing sustaining survivors through food access. The one prior to him is with King County Emergency Management, and that is for a maritime piece of work to ensure that we are able to get supplies in and out and work with transportation of medical supplies, people, frontline workers. Excuse me. And then the one that just ended prior to that is the community points of distribution from Snohomish County. And all of their projects are public and available on their websites. You can look those up. And if you would like me to go ahead and send you some links to their projects, I can do that as well.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to look them up, but if you think it's easier to send the links, I would appreciate that as well. Thank you so
Sure,
much.
absolutely. Other questions? Yes, Jenna.
Can you talk a little bit about the mechanism that you'd like to use to manage the contracting with CBOs, whether or not you want that for compliance reasons to be managed by the city, or are you looking for the consultant team to manage those contract relationships?
That's a great question. So the managing of the contracts and grants is going to be between me and a grants and contracts person. But finding those communities who are willing to participate would be the role of myself as well as the planning consultant. So contacting and reaching out to those communities and asking them if they are willing to participate in this, and that we'll be able to pay them a living wage for doing this work with us.
Okay, great. So that's really helpful to understand that on the actual invoicing and procurement side, that will be done in-house and where the break of work is. I appreciate it.
Yes, no problem. Tara?
Hi, Consuelo.
Hi.
I am
We're losing you a little bit.
trainings and the workshop.
Oh, sorry. Could
hear
you
me
start
now?
all over again? You broke up a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the workshops and the trainings that you mentioned. Are
Mhm.
these FEMA-based trainings, or are they new trainings to be developed? Are they trainings that OEM has in mind? What level of development will there be for those?
The level of development is that this will be new, new information and materials and trainings that will be developed by the planning consultant, by me, through this project. The Office of Emergency Management has some materials. The Office of Emergency Management also does some trainings, but for something this specific, we would have to develop through this program specifically for these communities in their language, whatever they need, that is going to be tailored to them. Because, for example, having materials for say South Park in the south of Seattle is going to look a little bit different than an urban native population who maybe talk to and have to look at their information the way that their culture reads things differently. So it will be a little different for everybody, but we will be doing that collectively.
Okay, and so that would include transcreation as well as translation
That's
for
correct.
working with the different communities. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Brandy.
Yes, one additional question just about logistics, as far as um, securing and locating various locations for community engagement. Would that be something that would be the responsibility of the planning consultant?
It would be in conjunction with me as the planning consultant, yes. So we would collectively be contacting different communities to get a feel for appetite for these sorts of things and the ability to perform the work.
Okay, excellent. And what if there were, if it was determined we would utilize, say, a hotel ballroom or a conference center or something like that for a larger meeting? Is that something that the consultant should consider within the budget and costing?
So that's a tricky question. Thank you for asking that. So the Office of Emergency Management has access, and certainly City of Seattle employees have access to different spaces. And so I wouldn't worry about that being a chunk of your budget, if at all, because that's something that as the project manager myself, I could seek out for
Okay.
the greater collective.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Steve.
Mike as well. I had a question about the regional part of this. So some communities of interest may extend outside city limits, or Indian tribes are not, or at least recognized Indian tribes are not in the city. How does that work?
That's a great question. So when we take on these projects as RCPG managers, we do the work within our specific area, but it's with the design in mind for the Puget Sound region. So that's 8 different Puget Sound counties. Now, it's a great thing that you asked about the tribal nations. I have been working with the Tulalip tribe, the emergency manager there. We're trying to talk the other tribes into forming a tribal nation group together, specifically so that they can talk about resilience hubs for their tribal nations. So that is not off the table. However, say we can work in White Center and that sort of thing, because it's unincorporated King County, but it's still kind of Seattle. But we are not going to say go all the way out to Enumclaw. We will be working with those partners from those jurisdictions to do this planning through what is called the RCPT, which is the Regional Catastrophic Planning Team. So they won't be unrepresented. They just will not be receiving the work specifically in their space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. That's perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Brandy.
Last question, I promise.
Oh, no, please keep asking.
I wanted to know if there was any, I know we're all coming back to in-person meetings, but depending on the comfort level of a particular community that we may be working with, are there options available if a particular community would prefer to meet virtually versus in person?
Absolutely. We don't want to alienate them or try and force them to do something that they're not comfortable with, because that's what government has always done. So if they need a translator, if they need an interpreter, sure, we can get that. If they want to meet only online, that's okay too. We work with them and find out what it is they want.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I also have several city staff on here. If any of you have any questions, I invite you now to ask those questions. Yes, Jordan.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if you can kind of just give us a sense of what you've learned so far in interacting with the community, and maybe kind of talk about some of the work that you've done in South Park and how you kind of folks coming in and doing that work and what you.
Yeah, That's a really great question. So I've been doing some reconnaissance work since I stepped into this role in January, and I've gotten different responses from different people, and a lot of consideration needs to be taken for these populations who were hit very hard. Oh, I see, Christy, your question. Jordan was asking that I talk about some of the work I've already been doing, specifically, say, in South Park, where they had a flood in December and January, where I was deployed out there for 8 days. So talking about that, and also just some of the feedback I've gotten from communities at large, a lot of consideration has not been taken enough about the populations who have been decimated by COVID, either by deaths or long COVID or um, other resulting diseases, sicknesses, whichever. People are exhausted, people are very tired. And so trying to explain to the communities that this is a pilot project and there is no capital money in this um, tends to make it a little tougher for them to keep listening. So that's one thing to think about walking into these communities who have been asked so much of and have had the last few years be absolutely terrible to their communities, making sure that we walk in with soft shoes and understanding that they're the ones that are telling us what it is they want and what it is they need and how much capacity that they have. And so South Park is one of the neighborhoods that I've been working very closely with. And people want this, but they want maybe something a little different, maybe a hybrid model from the government or some other entity. Does that help, Jordan?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
We still have about 30 minutes. You guys are welcome to ask anything you like. Steve.
I have a 29-minute question.
Sure, great.
So I think your point about capital is really important, and having been a city employee in the past, getting the other departments to pay attention and actually look at their own priorities and how they align or don't align seems to me to be essential for this to be more than just a plan. So what's your strategy for getting engagement and commitment from the city departments?
So I have already assembled an interdepartmental team with the Office of Sustainability and Equity, Office of Planning and Community Development, Office of, let's see, Facilities and Administrative Services, as well as Department of Construction and Inspections. And so I don't have a lack of departments wanting to step in and align and figure out how they fit in. I have conversations with SDOT, which is Department of Transportation, as well as Seattle Public Utilities. They're trying to figure out in their resilience work how there might be some crossover, overlap, ways that we can support each other and engage. So there is not a lack of want to join in through city partners. It's just trying to find that place where we are not trying to force their work into something that doesn't quite fit.
Thank you. That was a 2-minute question.
Okay.
I have
Randy,
one more question. Oh, sorry.
sorry. You're
I
next,
knew I
Jenna.
would think of something else. Just
Yeah.
based on a current project we're working on with the state of Washington. Once this is completed, has there been considerations to how to socialize this in a more public way? I think that's somewhere where emergency management tends to kind of forget the importance of really educating the public on the planning that's been going on. So I was curious if that had been a consideration.
Yes, that's a great question. It has been a consideration, and some of this has already been socialized inside and outside of emergency management, because I want people to know that we are out there and that there are other departments who have either resilience hub type work or resilience work in general, climate work. So there have actually been a couple of articles written about our work. Crosscut was, I think, the most recent one. So that information is getting out there, but in terms of socializing it through training, we have what is called a community safety ambassador program, and that community safety ambassador program can incorporate those trainings into what they already do in order to share more information about what resilience hubs are and how they work, and visiting resilience hubs at the end of this project that have been stood up, being able to see what can be done and if that's something that they want to aim for sure. So there's still consideration going on for that. So there will be more, but right now we've been trying to push that messaging both inside and outside the city.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Diana? Yeah.
My question was kind of looping back a little bit, and I know we talked about the particular most vulnerable populations who should be supported through this process and doing their own work as well. But can you talk about whether there are any other desired tie-ins to the Race and Social Justice Initiative that are high priority that you're looking to see?
So most people know that the city of Seattle has a race and social justice initiative, and our office does work with that platform. We do reporting both through that mechanism as well as to council on our efforts for inclusion. So the populations that I have outlined as the priority populations are the ones that FEMA has at the very baseline said, these people you need to take a look at first. But that doesn't mean that it has to be limited to that. And here in the state of Washington, we have 168 different languages spoken, which most of those are represented in Seattle. So I, as the project manager, am walking into this with a guideline and not a full stop, like this is my limitation. I don't know everything that's out there, and I'm open to seeing what it is and pivoting when we find something that was not accounted for or someone who is not accounted for, and making sure to find ways to include them.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait, I'm back. You just made me
Hi.
realize I had another question.
Of course.
On direct, can you talk a little bit about the break in direct costs? I know we talked about like facility rentals, for example. On translation and transcreation, would you like the consultants to include money within their proposal for that, or is that something that the city would manage directly based on need?
That is something that the consultant should account for in their budget.
Okay. I'll have to
There will be
figure out.
opportunities. There will be opportunities down the road for the city to also support, but for your purposes, adding that into the budget is helpful.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Tara.
One of the other things that's mentioned in the list of desired attributes or skills is GIS mapping. Can you talk a little bit about how you're envisioning GIS mapping folding into this project and kind of how it would really show up?
This is a big question, and I'm glad you asked that. So GIS mapping will help us understand the location and surroundings of each resilience hub that has been stood up or is, looking to be stood up. I have hazard maps like crazy, and so being able to overlay those is really, really helpful. The other thing, in my other work that I do at the Office of Emergency Management is I track the locations of different efforts that will stand up under certain circumstances. Some will be, like a disaster, but for catastrophic purposes, which is the intent of this grant ultimately, there are different efforts that are going to stand up. And I also track those locations because making sure that there is enough space between each of these efforts means that everyone gets to operate safely for their own purposes and not be overrun necessarily with large crowds, that sort of thing. So for example, the community points of distribution that I mentioned earlier, tracking where those are located so that everyone's safe and there's enough room to get people in and out, making sure in an urban or even suburban environment that we have not only cars that can, or locations that can allow cars, but also locations that can allow bikes, walk-ups, people in wheelchairs, for example. There is also the Seattle Emergency Hubs, which is its own separate independent volunteer group that will set up. I need to track where they are so that there is no interference between those different efforts and they can operate safely and on their own to do the work that they intend to do. There is also something called the Workforce Rallying Points that is new to the city and is going to be socialized by the end of this year, where after a catastrophic event, City of Seattle employees who cannot make it to their predetermined destinations, their job sites, can go to these locations to start initial operations for the city. So making sure that mapping all of these things to ensure that everybody is operating well and safely is super important for the overall project.
Okay, that's really helpful.
We have about 24 minutes. I'm here till the end, so if you need time to think about any other questions, I'm here for you. Were there any questions about the RFP itself, like the contents, the descriptions, the requirements that are there? Is there any clarification on that? Clarification for the questions that are being asked for the proposal? My director, Curry Mayer, is on the call. Curry, do you have anything that you would like to add or any questions you would like to ask?
I don't have any questions, Consuela. No, thank you. Thanks all for being on the call. We really appreciate it. Though we're really excited about this work and are looking forward to engaging a contractor that also has experience in both with resilience hubs and also with community and in the inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion space as well. So thank you for your interest. We're super excited.
Thank you, Curry. I will also let you all know that, as I had mentioned before, the Regional Catastrophic Planning Team, where all jurisdictions come together for these planning efforts, Curry is currently the vice chair for that committee at this time. I wanted to talk a little bit about as I had mentioned, this particular grant requires us to look at a catastrophic event and how to help people make sure that they are taken care of during a time that they could be in an isolation phase for, weeks. So putting something like that together just for that event that may or may not happen in the next 5, 20, 50 years can make them obsolete. So the idea of expanding that to also address smaller recurring risks seemed ideal, and they certainly look sometimes like city operated community centers. Only the difference is that the communities would be in charge of all operations. They would be in charge of community planning, any efforts that go on there, any classes that go on all year long that bring community together into these spaces, creating hopefully a space that they become familiar with, they trust, they recognize the faces of these folks working in there. So that when something disastrous or catastrophic happens, they would hopefully know to go to that space so that they can, get some supplies. Maybe, there's a backup generator and they can, plug something in. Certainly people with mobility devices that need electricity, food stores, cots. There's a variety of things that can happen in these spaces, and it's all up to the communities to decide what they want that to look like. One piece of feedback I have received from one community is that they really are afraid to think that big about a catastrophic event. And really, we're looking to modify a small space for only people that they know, in the event there's a blackout, or there's ice and snow and people need to stay warm, or there's a heat wave and they need to stay cool. So consider that when thinking about engaging community, the different ways that people talk about these, what they think that they can be, what they think that they are, and what they're willing to do in creating this total space that would operate all year long. Yes, Jenna.
Back.
Yes.
You actually maybe want to ask a question that's a point of distinction. Specifically, are you looking for this to provide a resource and set of services only when OEM is stood up versus in times where there are emergency response by the city, for example, but OEM may consult and provide guidance, but may not be formally stood up?
So in an operational period of 1 year, and they are equipped to handle, all of the daily stuff, the, annual stuff, the seasonal stuff that goes on, they can do whatever they like. They can effectively use whatever resources they have on site, whether OEM is stood up or not. They do not need us or our permission to do whatever it is they need to do. For example, like the flood in South Park, it would have been a perfect time to have one of these resilience hubs located in their neighborhood. We did not activate for that particular event, but there was a lot of city response. So this would have been a good space for them to have those resources, which is one of the reasons why I was out there, was to take a look at how people felt that they needed that space and those resources. But OEM does not dictate what they do.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you for that.
Yes, of course. Has anyone on this call ever seen a model similar to what's being proposed here in the RFP?
Yes.
Great. Was that here in the state of Washington?
I've seen a shift actually in the state of Washington, but also more broadly around more of a for community by community approach to planning work in general, I would say. Yeah, so it's as a lifetime community engagement professional, I love it.
Great, wonderful. We have 15 minutes left on the call. I'm here for the duration, so I will wait. You have more comments, questions, ideas. And don't forget that if you don't think of something today or during this call, you could always email me at rcpg.hubs@seattle.gov and ask your questions. The question period closes on July 7th.
Thank you, Ms. Crow. Have a great night. I look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing the recording posted.
Yes, thank you very much. Have a great day.